Commander Vexthor stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately regretted every decision that brought him to this moment. His crystalline armor, which had protected him through 17 major campaigns across the galaxy, felt suddenly inadequate. The heat hit him like a physical force. His environmental suit sensors screamed warnings in 3 different languages, all saying the same thing. Danger, evacuate immediately, atmospheric conditions incompatible with life. Except humans were walking around like it was nothing. A massive figure approached, hand extended in that peculiar human greeting gesture. The man was built like a combat mech, all shoulders and confidence, wearing nothing but thin fabric that did absolutely nothing to protect him from this hostile environment. Welcome to Fort Benning, Georgia. The human's voice boomed with unsettling cheerfulness. Master Sergeant Jake Morrison. You must be our guest from the Lumina system. Vexthor clasped the offered hand, noting the calluses and the grip strength that could probably crush tritanium. Commander Vexthor. We are honored to participate in this cultural exchange. Jake's face split into a grin that showed far too many teeth for Vexthor's comfort. Humans and their constant smiling. Predator species, every last one of them. Cultural exchange? That's one way to put it. Come on, let me show you around before the fun starts tomorrow. Behind Vexthor, his 3 officers were having their own crisis. Lieutenant Crow kept adjusting his suit's temperature controls, convinced they were malfunctioning. Officer Shin was staring at a group of young humans jogging past, none of them wearing protective gear. The 3rd officer, a female named Tara, had already pulled up Earth's environmental data on her wrist display, reading it with the kind of horror usually reserved for biohazard zones. Sergeant Morrison, Tara called out, her translator struggling with her rapid speech. Our readings indicate the current temperature is 95 degrees. Is there a malfunction in your atmospheric processors? Jake laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full belly laugh that made several passing humans turn and smile. No ma'am, that's just Georgia in July. This is actually pretty nice. Last week we hit 102. The 3 officers looked at each other. Their homeworld of Lumina maintained a constant 72 degrees across 90% of its surface. Temperatures above 85 required emergency shelter protocols. You consider this pleasant? Vexthor tried to keep the disbelief out of his voice and failed completely. Sure, Jake said, already walking toward a cluster of buildings that shimmered in the heat. Wait till you see what the recruits train in. August gets real interesting. They passed a formation of young humans running in synchronized steps, calling out something that sounded like counting. Vexthor noticed their ages immediately. Juveniles. Barely past adolescence by galactic standards. One female looked no older than 17 standard years, her face already flushed red from exertion, sweat pouring down her temples. Sergeant Morrison, that juvenile appears to be in medical distress. Vexthor pointed at the young woman. Jake glanced over. Who, Private Kelly? Nah, she's fine. That's just sweat. Humans do that to cool down. Pretty neat biological feature actually. We can keep going long after other species overheat. Sweat. Humans secreted fluids through their skin as a cooling mechanism. Vexthor had read about it in the briefing materials, but seeing it in person was distinctly unsettling. It seemed so inefficient, so primitive. Yet here they were, functioning perfectly in conditions that would hospitalize his entire crew. Jake led them to a 3-story building with large windows. This is your observation facility. Climate controlled to your specs, reinforced viewing ports, full medical suite just in case. You'll be watching the training from here, completely safe. Safe. Kral's voice pitched higher than usual. Are the training exercises dangerous? Well, I mean, there's always some risk. Jake said it so casually like he was discussing the weather. But we've got excellent medics on standby. Lost time injury rate is way down this year. Only 3 recruits needed hospital visits last cycle. Only 3. Only. Vexthor felt his core temperature drop despite the oppressive heat. And this is acceptable? Sure. Part of the process. Can't make warriors without some bumps and bruises. Jake opened the door to the building and blessed cool air rushed out. Come on, let me show you the setup. The observation room was impressive. Multiple screens showing different angles of the training grounds, comfortable seating designed for various alien physiologies, and yes, the medical suite that suddenly seemed far more necessary than Vexthor had anticipated. Jake pulled up a holographic display showing the next day's schedule. So tomorrow the new recruits arrive. 0600 hours, that's 6 in the morning. They'll do in-processing, get their gear, meet their drill instructors. Then the real fun begins. Vexthor studied the schedule. Physical training at 0630. 5-mile run. calisthenics, obstacle course familiarization, combat basics, all before noon. This seems extremely aggressive for a first day. First day sets the tone, Jake explained, pulling up another screen showing what appeared to be historical footage. See, basic training is 12 weeks. In that time we take civilians and turn them into soldiers. Can't waste a single day. 12 weeks. Vexthor's own basic training had lasted 6 months, and that was considered rushed. And they're all volunteers? Yep. Every single one chose to be here. Well, mostly chose. Some probably got nudged by recruiters with good sales pitches, but they all signed on the line. Jake's expression softened slightly. Look, I know this is going to seem intense to you folks. Different worlds, different methods. But I promise you we know what we're doing. These kids will be safe. Challenged, pushed harder than they've ever been pushed, but safe. That night, back in their climate-controlled quarters, Vexthor's team gathered around the briefing table. The room was silent except for the hum of the environmental systems working overtime to keep them comfortable. Commander, Tara finally spoke, her voice quiet. I've been reviewing Earth's geological and meteorological data. This planet experiences regular catastrophic weather events. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. The list goes on. And? Vexthor knew where this was going. And humans evolved here. They evolved on a planet actively trying to kill them, and they not only survived, they thrived. They conquered it. She looked at each of them. What if their training methods reflect that reality? What if what seems brutal to us is actually just preparing their young for the world they know? Krau shook his head. Or what if they're simply cruel? We'll know tomorrow. Vexthor stared out the window at the darkened training grounds. Somewhere out there, hundreds of young humans were spending their last night as civilians, probably nervous, probably scared, with no idea what awaited them. And honestly, neither did he. The alarm in Vexthor's quarters went off at 5:30 in the morning. He hadn't really slept. How could he, knowing what he was about to witness? His officers gathered in the observation room, each clutching containers of their preferred morning nutrition. None of them had much appetite. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when the first buses arrived. Young humans poured out, carrying small bags, looking around with expressions ranging from excitement to pure terror. Vexthor counted them through the viewing screen. 197 fresh recruits. So young. Some of the males still had that gangly, not quite finished growing look. Several females appeared to be no older than 18 standard years. Their children, Tara whispered beside him. Before Vexthor could respond, the doors to a nearby building exploded open. Not literally, though the force of the movement made it seem that way. 3 human drill instructors emerged, and the change in atmosphere was immediate. These weren't like Jake, who had been friendly and accommodating. These humans moved with predatory precision, their faces set in expressions of controlled fury. The largest of them, wearing a distinctive hat that Jake had called a campaign cover, positioned himself in front of the confused recruits. His voice, when it came, made Vexthor flinch even through the reinforced glass. Good morning and welcome to Fort Benning. The recruits mumbled something back, disorganized and uncertain. I can't hear you. Good morning. They tried again, louder this time but still scattered. The drill instructor's face somehow became even more intense. That is pathetic. When I say good morning, you will respond with good morning, drill sergeant. Do you understand? Yes, drill sergeant. Louder. Yes, drill sergeant. Vexthor watched in fascination. In less than 2 minutes, this human had taken a chaotic group and begun molding them into a unit. The psychology was brilliant, actually. Establish dominance, create a shared stress experience, demand unified response. My name is Drill Sergeant Davis, the human continued, his volume slightly lower but still commanding. For the next 12 weeks, your soul belongs to me. You will eat when I say eat. You will sleep when I say sleep. You will breathe when I say breathe. Is that clear? Yes, Drill Sergeant. What happened next unfolded so quickly that Vexthor almost missed it. The recruits were herded into formation, issued equipment at a blistering pace, given exactly 4 minutes to change into physical training uniforms, and lined up outside before most of them seemed to fully understand what was happening. The temperature was already climbing. Vexthor's suit registered 82 degrees, and the sun had barely risen. The recruits stood in formation wearing shorts and t-shirts, nothing else. No protective gear. No cooling systems. Just fabric and skin. Recruits. Drill Sergeant Davis's voice cut through the morning air. Physical training is the foundation of everything we do. You will run. You will push. You will suffer. And you will thank me for it. Understood? Yes, Drill Sergeant. Outstanding. Fall in for your morning run. They started running. Not a gentle warm-up jog, but a sustained pace that had Vexthor's hearts racing just watching it. The formation moved as one, feet hitting pavement in rhythm, while Drill Sergeant Davis called out a cadence. The recruits echoed his words, their voices carrying across the training grounds. 1 mile passed. Then 2. The temperature hit 87 degrees. Vexthor saw the first recruit stumble, a thin male who looked like he'd never run more than 100 meters in his life. He caught himself, kept going, his face bright red and streaming with that cooling fluid humans produced. This is madness, Krell muttered. They're going to start dropping. At mile 3 the first recruit did drop. A female shorter than most of her peers, simply collapsed mid-stride. Vexthor was halfway out of his seat when he saw a human medic sprint toward her. But what happened next stopped him cold. The medic checked her quickly, had her drink water from a container, and within 90 seconds she was back on her feet. Not being taken to hospital. Not being dismissed from training. Back on her feet, rejoining her formation, continuing to run. Did you see that? Vexthor gripped the edge of the console. She was incapacitated and they're making her continue. Jake, who had joined them for the observation, shook his head. She wasn't incapacitated. She got overheated and needed water. Big difference. Watch her technique. See how she's pacing herself now? She's learning her limits. The female recruit, who Vexthor later learned was named Private Rachel Torres, finished the 5-mile run. Her pace was slower than the others, her face looked like it might actually combust, but she finished. When she crossed the final marker, several other recruits patted her shoulder in encouragement. The run ended. 94 degrees now, according to Vexthor's sensors. The recruits weren't allowed to rest. Instead, Drill Sergeant Davis had them perform something called push-ups. The humans dropped to the ground and began raising and lowering their bodies using only their arms. Up and down. Up and down. Vexthor counted. 20. 30. 40. A male recruit's arms gave out. He collapsed face first onto the pavement. Private Chin. Wait, that wasn't right. Private Miller. Did I tell you to stop? No, Drill Sergeant, the recruit gasped from the ground. Then why are you taking a nap on my field? No excuse, Drill Sergeant. Get back into position. You will complete your repetitions or you will be here until Christmas. Private Miller pushed himself back up, arms shaking violently, and somehow completed 10 more push-ups before he was released. The morning continued in this pattern. Running. Calisthenics. More running. The recruits were soaked through with sweat, their faces ranging from pink to deep red, their breathing labored and desperate. And yet they continued. Every time one fell they got back up. Every time someone's body gave out they found something extra to keep going. Afternoon brought something that made Vexthor's crystalline structure ache in sympathy. Hand-to-hand combat training. The recruits paired off on padded mats. A different instructor, Drill Sergeant Nicole Brooks, demonstrated basic strikes and defensive positions. Then she uttered words that made Vexthor's translator hiccup in confusion. Now you're going to practice these techniques on each other. Controlled strikes, 70% power. I want you to feel the impact, learn what it's like to take a hit. Your partner is not your enemy. They're your training tool. Begin. Day 3 arrived faster than Vexthor would have liked. His officers were already showing signs of what human doctors called stress, and they were just watching from a safe distance. The recruits, meanwhile, had been living this nightmare for 72 straight hours. Yet when they formed up that morning they moved with slightly more coordination than before. Still exhausted, still clearly in pain, but adapting. Always adapting. Jake met them in the observation room with 2 cups of that terrible human beverage called coffee. Big day today, Commander. The obstacle course. Vexthor looked at the structure dominating the training field. It stretched nearly 200 meters, a collection of wooden walls, metal bars, ropes, and various implements that looked like they'd been designed by someone who genuinely hated people. That appears unnecessarily dangerous. That's kind of the point, Jake said, taking a sip of his coffee like he hadn't just admitted to intentionally endangering young soldiers. Come on, let me walk you through it before the fun starts. They left the observation room, and Vexthor got his first up-close look at what humans considered acceptable training equipment. The first obstacle was a wall roughly 4 meters high, made of rough wood that already showed countless scrapes and marks from previous attempts. No ladder. No rope. Just wall. How are they expected to climb this? Tara asked, running her scanner over the surface. Upper body strength, momentum, and a little creativity, Jake patted the wall fondly. Some recruits run and jump, grab the top, pull themselves over. Others get a boost from their battle buddies. That's what we call teamwork. The next obstacle was worse. A rope climb that stretched 9 meters into the air, ending at a platform with a bell. Below it just dirt and wood chips. No safety net. No harness system. Nothing to catch a falling human except gravity and the ground. And if they fall? Vexthor tried to keep his voice steady. Then they learn to hold on tighter next time, Jake said simply. We've got medics on standby and the wood chips help cushion impacts. But honestly, falls are rare. Humans have pretty good self-preservation instincts when they're dangling 9 meters up. Crow was examining a section of the course that involved crawling under barbed wire through mud. Actual barbed wire. The kind designed to tear flesh. This cannot be regulation. Oh, it absolutely is. See how the wire's positioned? High enough that if they keep their butts down and crawl properly they won't get cut. But if they panic and raise up, well, that's a learning experience too. Jake checked his watch. They'll be starting soon. We should head back. From the observation room, Vexthor watched Drill Sergeant Davis gather the recruits around the course entrance. Even from this distance he could see the nervousness in their body language. Several were stretching, rolling their shoulders, preparing themselves mentally for what was coming. Listen up. Davis's voice carried clearly. This obstacle course is designed to test your physical fitness, your mental toughness, and your ability to work as a team. Some of you will fly through it. Some of you will struggle. But all of you will complete it. Understood? Yes, Drill Sergeant. First group on the line. 6 recruits stepped forward. Vexthor recognized Private Rachel Torres, the young woman who had collapsed during the run on day 1. She looked terrified but determined. Next to her stood Private Danny Walsh, the male who'd taken that brutal chest strike during combat training. Private Kevin Brooks bounced on his toes, nervous energy radiating from him. Private Lisa Mitchell stretched her arms one more time. Private Tommy Private Tommy Anderson cracked his knuckles. And finally, Private Amy Foster, who'd accidentally kneed someone in the ribs, took a deep breath. Go! They exploded toward the first wall. Tommy hit it running, jumped, caught the top edge with his fingertips, and hauled himself over with pure arm strength. He made it look easy. Danny tried the same technique but his jump was short. His fingers scraped the wall's edge and he fell back. Move, Private Walsh. Try again. Danny backed up, ran harder, jumped higher. This time he caught the edge. His arms shook with effort as he pulled his body weight up and over the wall. It wasn't graceful but it worked. Rachel approached the wall differently. She was shorter than the others and she knew it. Kevin, give me a boost. Kevin positioned himself against the wall, cupped his hands and launched Rachel upward. She grabbed the top, swung her leg over and dropped down the other side. Kevin followed, using a running start to clear it. See that? Jake pointed at the screen. That's what we're training. Not individual heroes but soldiers who know when to ask for help and when to give it. The rope climb separated the capable from the struggling. Tommy went up like he'd been born climbing ropes, rang the bell at the top and slid down with controlled speed. Lisa followed, slower but steady, her technique solid. Then came Rachel. She grabbed the rope, started climbing and got about halfway before her arms began shaking. She stopped, hanging there 3 meters off the ground. Vexthor leaned forward, his breathing stopped. She fell from that height. Private Torres. Drill Sergeant Brooks's voice cut through the air. You thinking about quitting? No, Drill Sergeant. Rachel's voice was strained. Then keep climbing. Your arms aren't broken. Your legs work. Get to that bell. Rachel hung there for another moment. Then, impossibly, she started moving again. One hand up. Wrap legs. Other hand up. Wrap legs. The technique was sloppy, her whole body trembling with effort, but she climbed. When her hand finally hit that bell, the sound echoed across the training field. Outstanding, Torres. Now get down here. The crawl under barbed wire was exactly as terrible as Vexthor had imagined. The recruits dropped to their stomachs in cold, thick mud and began inching forward. The wire was low enough that they had to keep flat, using elbows and knees to propel themselves. Danny raised his back too high. The barbed wire caught his shirt, tearing fabric. He froze. Keep moving, Walsh. It's just a shirt. Danny flattened himself more and continued crawling. When he emerged on the other side, muddy and scraped but intact, Vexthor realized he'd been holding his breath. The balance beam claimed its first victim 20 minutes into the course. Private Kevin Brooks, who'd been doing well, stepped onto the narrow beam suspended a meter off the ground. 3 steps in, his foot slipped. He windmilled his arms, trying to recover, but gravity won. He fell hard onto his shoulder. Medics were there instantly. They checked him, moved his arm through its range of motion, asked questions. Kevin winced but shook his head at whatever they were asking. "He's refusing medical evacuation," Jake translated. "Wants to finish the course." "He's injured," Tara protested. "He's bruised. There's a difference." Jake watched as Kevin climbed back onto the beam, favoring his shoulder but continuing. "That's courage right there. That's what we're building." The cargo net was the final major obstacle, a 10-meter rope structure that swayed with every movement. The recruits had to climb up one side and down the other. Lisa Mitchell was halfway up when the recruit below her, a nervous male named Private Ryan Cooper, slipped. His foot kicked out, hitting the net hard, sending vibrations through the entire structure. Lisa held on, waiting for the swaying to stop. "You good, Ryan?" "Yeah, sorry." "No problem. Just warn me next time you decide to dance." They laughed. Exhausted, covered in mud and sweat, hanging from a rope net 3 stories off the ground, and they laughed. The human capacity for humor and misery was something Vex Thor was beginning to understand was a survival trait. By midday, every recruit had completed the course at least once. Some had flown through it. Others had struggled with every obstacle. Private Tommy Anderson had the fastest time. Private Rachel Torres had the slowest, but she'd finished without help on any obstacle except that initial wall boost. But Drill Sergeant Davis wasn't done. "Congratulations. You survived the course once. Now you're going to do it again. Faster this time." The groans from the recruits were audible even in the observation room. "Again?" Kral's voice was hollow. "They're already exhausted." "Yep," Jake confirmed. "Second run is always harder. Bodies are tired, minds are worn down. That's when we find out who's really got it." The second run was brutal. Several recruits who'd done well the first time struggled. Others who'd barely made it through somehow found reserves of strength Vex Thor didn't know existed. Private Danny Walsh, who'd torn his shirt on the barbed wire, tore it again in the exact same spot. This time he just kept crawling, not even pausing. Private Amy Foster slipped on the rope climb, sliding down and getting rope burn on her palms. She looked at her reddened hands, took a breath, and started climbing again. Private Kevin Brooks, with his bruised shoulder, attacked that balance beam like it had personally insulted his family. He made it across without falling, though his face was tight with pain. When it was over, when the last recruit crossed the final obstacle, they collapsed where they stood. Just dropped into the dirt and mud, chests heaving, bodies spent. Drill Sergeant Davis walked among them, and his voice, when it came, was different. Still loud, still commanding, but something had shifted. "You survived the obstacle course. Twice. You pushed through pain, through fear, through exhaustion. And not one of you quit. That's what I'm talking about. That's what warriors look like." That evening Vex Thor updated his report. His hands shook slightly as he typed. Day 3, observed obstacle course training. Multiple minor injuries. 0 medical evacuations. Recruits repeatedly placed in situations where failure could result in significant harm. Despite this, morale remained surprisingly high. Beginning to understand that human military training is not designed to break soldiers, but to teach them they are harder to break than they believe. Requesting psychological evaluation protocols. Observing this training is affecting my team's mental health. He didn't mention that he'd spent the last hour watching Private Rachel Torres, that young woman who'd almost given up on the rope, laughing with her fellow recruits as they cleaned mud from their boots. Humans didn't just survive hardship. They found joy in it. And that, somehow, was the most terrifying thing Vex Thor had witnessed yet. Retry. Today you faced live fire. Today you learned what it feels like to have bullets in the air. Some of you made mistakes. Brooks, you know what you did wrong. But you corrected it and completed your mission. Torres, you had a malfunction and cleared it under pressure. Anderson Mitchell, you took hits and kept fighting. That's what we needed to see. That's what makes you soldiers instead of civilians playing dress-up. That evening, as the recruits limped back to their barracks, Vex Thor found Lieutenant Kral packing his belongings. "I cannot continue," Kral said without preamble. "Commander, I have developed what the human medical staff calls anxiety disorder simply from watching this training. I cannot eat. I cannot sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see those young humans crawling under live fire." His voice cracked. "I'm a decorated combat veteran of 3 campaigns, and watching human basic training has broken me." Vex Thor wanted to argue, wanted to order him to stay, but he couldn't. Because he understood completely. You have my permission to depart. File your report honestly. Krau wasn't alone. Officer Shin joined him. Of Vexthor's original team of 5, only 2 remained, including himself. That night, Jake found Vexthor on the observation deck, staring at the now quiet training grounds. Losing people, Commander? 2 more departed today. They couldn't handle the psychological strain of observation. Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, I figured. Look, I know this seems brutal to you. I know your people train differently. Why? Vexthor turned to face him. Why subject them to this? These aren't hardened warriors. They're children, Jake. Barely adults. Why put them through live fire, through pain, through such extreme stress? Jake was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. Because the galaxy doesn't care that they're young. Because enemies won't go easy on them because it's their first combat. Because if we coddle them in training, we're sending them to their deaths in war. He gestured toward the barracks. Every bruise they earn here, every time they push through fear, every bullet they hear snap overhead, it's preparing them for a reality we can't change. Better they learn here with safeties in place and medics on standby, than learn in actual combat where there's no reset button. Vexthor had no response. The human logic was sound even if the methods were terrifying. He filed his report that night with shaking hands. Day 10, observed live fire training. Recruits exposed to actual combat conditions including live ammunition and controlled explosions. Multiple impacts from non-lethal training rounds. 0 serious injuries. Human training philosophy now clear, they wound in training to prevent death in combat. My remaining officers and I will complete observation, but request psychological support upon return. 2 days remained until graduation. Vexthor wondered if he'd make it. Graduation day arrived with clear blue skies and temperatures that Vexthor had actually grown somewhat accustomed to. Somewhat. His suit still registered the heat as dangerous, but after 12 weeks of observation he'd learned that what his equipment called dangerous, humans called Tuesday. The parade ground had been transformed. Bleachers filled with families lined both sides, humans of all ages clutching signs and flowers and cameras. Children bounced with excitement. Elderly humans sat with proud expressions and misty eyes. These were the families of the recruits, here to witness the transformation of their loved ones from civilians into soldiers. Vexthor stood among them, wearing a formal version of his crystalline armor. Beside him, Officer Terra adjusted her own ceremonial dress. They were the only 2 who'd made it through the entire 12 weeks of observation. The others had departed at various points, unable to handle the psychological weight of watching human training. I didn't think we'd make it, Terra admitted quietly. Neither did I, Vexthor replied. Many times I considered requesting departure. But I needed to see this through. I needed to understand. Music began playing from a human military band. Then they appeared. The recruits, no longer recruits really, marched onto the field in perfect formation. The difference from day 1 was staggering. These weren't the uncertain, scared young people who'd stumbled off buses 12 weeks ago. These were soldiers. They moved as one, their steps synchronized, their bearing confident, their eyes forward. Vexthor scanned the formation and found familiar faces. Private Rachel Torres, the young woman who'd collapsed on that first 5-mile run, now marched with her head high and her stride strong. Private Danny Walsh, who'd struggled with that first wall on the obstacle course, stood ramrod straight with shoulders back. Private Tommy Anderson, Private Lisa Mitchell, Private Kevin Brooks, Private Amy Foster, Private Ryan Cooper, all of them transformed by 12 weeks of controlled hardship. Company halt. Drill Sergeant Davis's voice rang out, and 200 feet stopped as one. The ceremony began with speeches from officers Vexthor had never met. They talked about tradition, about honor, about the proud history of the base and the soldiers it had produced. But Vexthor was watching the families. A mother in the front row was crying, clutching at tissue, her eyes locked on a son in the 3rd row. An older man wearing an ancient military uniform sat with his hand over his heart, watching a granddaughter he clearly hadn't seen in months. A young woman held a baby who couldn't have been more than a year old, pointing toward the formation saying, "That's Daddy. That's your daddy." These families had sent their children, their siblings, their partners into a system that Vexthor now understood was designed to break them down and rebuild them stronger. And they trusted. They trusted that the drill sergeants screaming at their loved ones actually cared. They trusted that the pain had purpose. They trusted that their people would come back better than they left. The name calling began. One by one, graduates crossed the stage to receive their certificates and shake hands with the commanding officer. When Rachel Torres's name was called, her mother stood up screaming with joy, not caring who heard her. Rachel's smile could have lit up the entire base. When she shook the commander's hand, Vexthor saw Drill Sergeant Brooks watching from the side, her own expression proud. Danny Walsh's father, that older man in the vintage uniform, saluted his son when Danny received his certificate. Danny, against all protocol, saluted back. The crowd erupted in applause. Tommy Anderson did a subtle fist pump when he received his certificate, drawing laughs from his fellow graduates. Lisa Mitchell cried happy tears on stage. Kevin Brooks, his shoulder fully healed now, stood taller than Vexthor had ever seen him stand. When the last name was called, when the last certificate was awarded, Drill Sergeant Davis stepped forward to address the graduates one final time. 12 weeks ago you arrived here as civilians. Today you leave as soldiers. You have been pushed, tested, and challenged in ways you never imagined. You've run until your legs gave out, then run more. You've climbed obstacles that seemed impossible. You've faced live fire and learned what courage really means. Some of you wanted to quit. All of you wanted to quit at some point, but you didn't. You persevered. You supported each other. You became more than individuals. You became a team, a unit, a family. He paused and his voice softened just slightly. I am proud of every single one of you. Dismissed. The formation broke. Families rushed forward, and the parade ground became chaos in the best possible way. Parents embraced children. Partners reunited. Siblings congratulated each other. Vexthor watched Rachel Torres disappear into her mother's arms, both of them crying. Danny Walsh's father was talking rapidly, gesturing, clearly asking about every detail of the experience. Tommy Anderson was surrounded by what looked like a dozen relatives all competing for his attention. Commander Vexthor? Vexthor turned to find Jake approaching with Drill Sergeant Davis and Drill Sergeant Brooks. Jake held a folder in his hands. We wanted to give you something before you head home, Jake said, opening the folder. Inside was a certificate, similar to the ones the graduates had received but with different text. Honorary Observer Completion Certificate, it read. Awarded to Commander Vexthor for completing 12 weeks of basic training observation. Signed by every drill instructor on the base. Vexthor took it with both hands, treating it with the reverence it deserved. I don't know what to say. Most alien observers don't last a week, Drill Sergeant Davis said. His voice was still commanding but held genuine respect. You watched our whole program. That takes guts, even if you were just watching. You earned that. Drill Sergeant Brooks nodded. Plus, you never once told us to stop or change our methods even though I know you wanted to. You trusted us to do our jobs. That means something. A young voice interrupted them. Excuse me, sir? They turned to find Private Rachel Torres standing there, still in uniform, her mother standing proudly beside her. Private Torres, Vexthor acknowledged. Congratulations on your graduation. Thank you, sir. I just wanted to say, I know you were watching us. The drill sergeants told us about the alien observers. She smiled. I hope we didn't scare you too much. Vexthor let out a sound that was almost a laugh. Private Torres, I watched you collapse on day 1 and finish a 5-mile run anyway. I watched you nearly fall from a rope climb and push yourself to ring that bell. I watched you crawl under live machine gun fire with mud in your teeth. You and your fellow graduates are the most terrifying group of young soldiers I've ever encountered. Rachel's mother beamed with pride. Rachel herself stood a little straighter. But I also watched your drill sergeants, Vexthor continued. I saw Drill Sergeant Brooks spend extra hours teaching proper techniques to those who struggled. I saw Drill Sergeant Davis personally check on every recruit who showed signs of injury. I saw your instructors push you to your absolute limits, but I also saw them care deeply about your welfare and success. He looked at all of them. You humans have taught me something important. Compassion isn't about avoiding hardship. True compassion is preparing someone for the challenges they'll face, even when that preparation is difficult. Jake smiled. So what are you going to tell the Galactic Coalition? Vexthor pulled out his data pad and showed them his final report. He read the conclusion aloud. Humans do not train for war. They train to survive. Earth is a death world that has spent millions of years trying to kill humanity, and humanity responded by becoming unkillable. Their military training reflects this reality. What appears brutal is actually profound respect for their soldiers. They would rather wound in training than bury in combat. The Galactic Coalition has fundamentally misunderstood human capabilities. We assess them as primitive because their technology lagged behind ours. We failed to recognize that their greatest weapon isn't technology. It's resilience. It's the ability to be knocked down and get back up. It's finding strength they didn't know they had when everything seems impossible. Recommendation: complete strategic reassessment of human military capabilities. Secondary recommendation: our alliance with humanity is the most valuable strategic asset the Coalition possesses. Ensure this alliance remains strong. The drill sergeants read it in silence. Finally, Davis spoke. That's one hell of a report, Commander. It's an honest one, Vexthor replied. You've changed how I see everything. Not just humans, but training, leadership, what it means to prepare young people for an uncertain future. As Vexthor and Terra prepared to leave, Rachel Torres came running back. Commander, wait. Can I ask you something? Of course, Private. Did we really scare the other alien observers away? Vexthor considered lying, considered softening the truth, but these were soldiers now. They deserved honesty. Yes. 2 of my officers developed anxiety disorders simply from watching your training. They were combat veterans who'd seen actual warfare, and watching human basic training broke them psychologically. 1 left after the obstacle course. 2 more left after live fire day. Only Officer Terra and myself completed the full observation period. Rachel's eyes went wide. Seriously? Seriously? Your training exceeds the Special Forces qualification standards of most galactic species. You did that in 12 weeks, starting as complete novices. Rachel looked back at her fellow graduates, at the families celebrating, at the drill sergeants watching their soldiers with pride. Then she looked back at Vexthor. Good. I hope the galaxy knows not to mess with us. She said it with a smile, but Vexthor heard the steel underneath. That was the point of all this, he realized. Not to create killers, but to create humans so confident in their capabilities that potential enemies would think twice. As their transport lifted off, Vexthor watched Fort Benning grow smaller below. Somewhere down there, a new group of recruits was probably arriving right now, scared and uncertain, about to begin the same transformation he'd witnessed. Within 3 months of his report submission, everything changed in the Galactic Coalition. Applications for the Human Observer Program increased by 3,000%. Every military in the galaxy wanted to understand what made humans so formidable. Battle tactics were rewritten. Training protocols were reconsidered. The humans, once seen as primitive newcomers, were now studied as the gold standard of military resilience. But most observers didn't last. They'd arrive confident, watch day 1 and request early departure. The few who made it past the first week would leave after the obstacle course or live fire exercises. In the first year after Vexthor's report, over 200 alien military observers attempted the program. Only 6 completed it. Vexthor kept that certificate Jake had given him displayed in his office. When other commanders asked about it, he told them the same thing every time. I watched humans take their children and forge them into weapons through controlled hardship and genuine care. I watched young people pushed past every limit they thought they had, then pushed further. I watched them fall and get back up, fail and try again, hurt and keep going. And I realized something terrifying. Humans don't train to be unbreakable. They train knowing they'll break, and they learn to keep fighting anyway. That's why they're the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they're fearless, but because they're afraid and do it anyway. The Galactic Coalition learned to be very, very grateful that humanity considered them allies and not enemies. Because a species that considered live fire exercises basic training was not a species anyone wanted to fight. And somewhere on Earth, in places like Fort Benning, the cycle continued. Scared civilians arriving. Drill sergeants breaking them down. Rebuilding them stronger. Teaching them that their limits were illusions and their potential was boundless. Humans creating more humans who refused to quit. The most terrifying weapon in the galaxy. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.